Listen, call them what you want. Knee knockers, golden nuggets, thigh slappers, etc. But our friends at Manscaped refer to them as the boys. Now, not every man has children, including me unless you count my cats, and, well, I always do. But every man is responsible for their 2 boys below the waist. When your little guys have more hair than they need, like my cats, trust Manscaped for all your grooming dreams. Boys need love too, that's what I always say. So join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com and use code PRETTYDARK for 20% off plus free shipping. You heard it here first, folks. The boys are back in town. I got my first Manscaped back in 2020, and let me tell you, it got me through those hard times. Just me, my lawnmower 3.0, my cats, a bottle of whiskey. You get the idea. A lot of nude gardening. But none of that would have been possible without the confidence that comes with Manscaped. And I haven't been the same since. The lawnmower family now includes the Lawnmower 3.0 Plus, the 4.0 Pro, and the 5.0 Ultra, which helps reduce nicks, ingrown hairs, and other grooming accidents. Yeesh. Yep, 3 ball trimmers, you better believe it. That's 3 trimmers, not 3 balls. What do you think this is, some kind of sideshow act? Get out of here! Boys need love too, and for this reason, each trimmer is equipped with skin-safe technology, an LED spotlight so you can shave in the dark, and unique features for different grooming needs. But I gotta say it, skin-safe technology does not guarantee cut protection, don't be an idiot. But you can shave in the shower, or take it outside to shave during a summer afternoon thunderstorm, because these babies are waterproof. Summer vacay coming up? Manscaped has got you covered. These trimmers come with a travel case and even a travel lock feature to avoid any accidental powering and all those weird looks in the airport. Have you ever even seen Fight Club? 9 times out of 10, it's an electric razor, but every once in a while, it's a Manscaped lawnmower. Always imply ownership in the event of a ball trimmer. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code PRETTYDARK at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code PRETTYDARK at manscaped.com. For the best your boys have ever looked. Trust Manscaped.
You're listening to That's Pretty Dark,
the podcast where we talk about all of the entertainment that scared us as children
and still haunts us as adults. So grab your flashlight and join us as we take a frightfully nostalgic look over our shoulders
and under our beds
and in our closets.
And together we'll realize, whoa, that's pretty dark.
Pretty dark.
Do you think, back in the early 90s, when DJ McHale was making not just this show as a whole, but this episode in particular, he knew just how on brand he was gonna be 30 years later?
Yes, because I think DJ McHale knows everything and also can see the future.
Two little silly gooses who grew up obsessed
silly gooses
with his show,
yes,
decided to make a podcast about his TV show. Do you think he knew what he was doing?
I think he did, and I'm ever grateful to Mr. McHale.
Oh, me too.
Because, Darklings, we get asked
ladies and
all
gentlemen,
the time, thems, theys,
boys and girls,
we are asked all the time,
sadly growing up,
when we will be returning to DJ McHale's Are You Afraid of the Dark?
It's now!
And it's now.
It's tonight.
I'm so excited to tell you that I'm going to be leading the charge back into a pretty dark Are You Afraid of the Dark summer.
Yeah.
Feels like a good summer thing to do, you know?
Would you look at my shirt right now?
I am so glad, and I was this close to doing the same thing.
Look at the shirt.
Halftone Horror, we both have this Are You Afraid of the Dark shirt that we love, that we gave away in a giveaway a couple years ago to a lucky listener. Shout out to you, Jacob. But we've been ready to put those back on and dive back in, and we're doing that today.
Are you afraid of the dark?
Most of the time, yeah.
Yes, grew up that way. I was born this way.
We were born this way.
My name is Christian.
My name is Kaylin.
And we were born this way. Do you spend so much time thinking about the world of make-believe that you've started to forget the difference between reality and imagination? Do you prefer the original fairy tales to the wimpy versions?
Oh, man.
Do you ever wish you'd been more careful for what you'd wished for?
See,
to begin with?
every element.
You've come to the right place.
This is the first episode of the second season of Are You Afraid of the Dark, which aired on July 16th, 1993.
Yeah, buddy.
It's called The Tale of the Final Wish, and it was written by our favorite, Chloe Brown, and it was directed by a totally different person entirely. Trust me, DJ McHale.
Yeah, completely different person. Absolutely not a pseudonym for DJ McHale. I thought about that watching it today. I was like, can you believe we haven't said the words Chloe Brown in like what?
It's
like
been a minute
year and a half?
and now we're back.
And
We're
it's
back
like
with
she
Chloe.
never left the room.
She never left, and we're going to talk a lot about Chloe today. The IMDb summary of this episode simply states, an adolescent girl who loves fairy tales learns that they are not what they're cracked up to be.
Emphasis on the crack.
Emphasis on the crack.
I guess.
And luckily, we've got plenty of time to go into more detail than IMDb did.
Let's do it.
I think this is the perfect episode to help us sink back into the eerie familiarity of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Because it combines elements of so many things that we've discussed so far, as Christian just told us. This, to me, is as if Labyrinth and Little Nemo mixed together with some other fairy tale classics and were reborn into the early 90s with a touch of Monkey's Paw and Twisted Claw for good measure.
Damn, yeah.
It's loaded with references discussing the pretty dark derivatives of so many childhood fairy tales, which is, as you said, and as I say right here in my notes, very on brand for us. It also tries to make some points about growing up.
Yeah.
And honestly, even its mixed messages mimic the way that this part of life can often feel fraught, with one foot in childhood and one foot being tugged mercilessly in the other direction.
Yo.
It's sort of the same way we can say we're between a dream and waking up. So to open, we rejoin our Midnight Society friends, which I couldn't help but saying aloud to my TV, hi guys, we missed you. We join them around the campfire. These are all familiar faces from season 1, although we are notably missing Eric. Kristen is dressed in costume, a fairy tale dress, with a bit of medieval flair, and she's reading aloud the real versions of some of the darkest versions of the tales.
So sad to see Eric go.
Yeah, it is a bummer. We did give some good tributes to him when we talked about season 1.
Just inexplicably gone.
Hate that he left.
Real bummer.
If thou wilt, cut off the heads of thy 2 children, and besmear me with their blood, I shall receive life again.
Besmear me? That's disgusting.
Besmear me.
Besmear. I know
Gross.
that you Darklings probably want to know, if you don't already, where this came from. And I'm glad to tell you that this is referencing Faithful John or Trusty John, which is a German tale first published by the Brothers Grimm in the 2nd edition of Grimm's Fairy Tales in 1819.
All right.
And there are versions of it, many variations, as there always are with fairy tales.
As these things go.
The story centers on themes of loyalty, sacrifice, and devotion, and it is an Arne Thompson Type 516,
Heck yeah.
which is a pretty dark, deep cut for those of you that have been here a minute. They cataloged about 500 tales under this type, of which over 200 were Irish and the remainder were from the rest of Europe and European colonies in America.
Right on. That's super cool.
Some similar fairy tales, if any of these ring a bell for you all, are In Love with a Statue, How to Find Out a True Friend, The Man of Stone, and Amis et Amelis.
Gonna go do the reading.
Would you like to hear the story of Faithful John
Yeah.
that Kristen is
Yes.
now telling our Midnight Society
This
friends?
is really what I'm here for. I feel like most of this episode is about the references,
Mhm.
the darkness of these stories that are being referenced.
Exactly. So the story of Faithful John begins with a dying king who entrusts his loyal servant, Faithful John, with the care of his son, the young prince. The king makes John promise to guide and protect the prince, ensuring that he will be a good and wise ruler. After the king's death, John becomes the prince's mentor and caretaker. One day, John takes the young king on a voyage where they see a portrait of a beautiful princess. The young king falls instantly in love and resolves to win her hand in marriage. John, understanding the dangers that lie ahead, devises a plan to help the king, and he and the king disguise themselves as merchants to get close to the princess. They successfully win over the princess and spirit her away to the king's ship. However, John overhears 3 ravens conversing about 3 deadly dangers that await the young king.
Yeah, it's pretty common.
The first danger is that the king will try to mount a horse that will leap with him into the sky and never return.
Sure. Yeah, I've seen that.
The second is if the king touches a golden wedding shirt, it will cause him to burst into flames.
When has that not happened?
Every time. And the third is that during the wedding dance, the queen will fall dead unless someone crushes 3 drops of her blood and spits them out.
Oh, yeah.
That's a common wedding
As
occurrence.
far as wedding traditions go, I think that's up there.
John takes each danger upon himself to protect the king. When the enchanted horse appears, John shoots it. When the golden shirt is presented, John quickly burns it.
Yeah, all right.
And during the wedding dance, John crushes the 3 drops of the blood from the queen and spits them out. Each time, his actions appear suspicious and alarming to the court, and the young king becomes increasingly distrustful of his mentor.
Yeah, he looks like a crazy person is what he does.
He looks like a crazy person, and no one really can tell what his motivations are.
Faithful John.
If he tells anyone of these things that he knows, by the way, some variations say this and some don't, but he's supposed to turn to stone from the waist down.
Oh, rock hard.
Rock hard. Eventually, John is sentenced to death for his seemingly treacherous behavior. But before he's executed, he reveals the truth about his actions and the dangers that he prevented. And the king is filled with remorse and orders John to be turned into a golden statue to honor his loyalty. So I assume, he told someone other than the king, because if he just told the king, maybe he wouldn't have been executed, but he would have turned to stone, I guess.
Shouldn't have been so dumb.
And I guess maybe that's part of the whole thing. He turns to stone, he's a statue. There are so many variations, and I tried to, condense them all together. So there are pieces and parts of this that you may have heard that I may not be sharing, but it's all intact. The king learns that to restore John's life, he must sacrifice his own children and rub their blood on the statue, from whence Kristen's quote comes.
I mean, we've all been there, am I right?
Out of deep gratitude and sorrow, he prepares to do so. And just as he's about to sacrifice his children, the golden statue of John comes to life, revealing that it was all a test of the king's loyalty and devotion.
Jeez.
However, there are some versions, in fact, maybe more versions, where he actually does kill his twins.
Yeah?
Yes, but they're able to be revived by John's magic. And there are still other versions where the king also tests the queen in the same manner, just to be sure she would also kill her own children to repay the debt of loyalty to faithful John.
Yeah. Wow.
This somewhat crazy sounding story illustrates that true loyalty may require great personal sacrifice. It also underscores the importance of understanding and recognizing the intentions behind people's actions rather than making hasty judgments about what's going on. If you see somebody drinking someone else's blood at a wedding and spitting it out, maybe just mind your business,
I usually look the other way when I see somebody drinking blood and spitting it out.
Yeah.
Because if they swallow it, at least I know they're a vampire and they are doing it on purpose. If you spit it back out, you're like a blood sommelier. I mean, at that point, I'm like, what is your life? How did you get here? I actually don't want to know the answer to that question.
We shouldn't ask these questions.
Usually,
because otherwise they might turn to stone.
You see that in a dark alley, and you want to just turn around and go back out the way you came and not take the shortcut.
Never to return.
Just like a fairy tale. You never take the shortcut. It's always bad.
While this degree of loyalty, blind loyalty, is not really the same in our culture as it was in a lot of ancient cultures, I do appreciate the moral that we should give people the benefit of the doubt sometimes. And if someone that we trust or we know to be trustworthy is doing something that's out of character, we shouldn't just immediately assume that they're no longer trustworthy.
Especially when they wink at you and say, if I told you, I'd have to kill you.
Or I'd kill myself.
Or I'd have to kill myself. So are you intentionally not making the direct reference to Abraham and Isaac?
No, I'm not, because that's my next sentence in my notes.
Hell yeah. Okay.
I'm not intentionally not making that reference. I am, in fact, intentionally making it, because this story has very, very strong Abraham and Isaac vibes, which is a biblical story, if you're unfamiliar, in which a father is made to sacrifice his son out of loyalty to God.
Yeah, to prove your love. To prove your
love. Take your son up on the mountain. He's the sacrificial lamb. Because instead of sacrificing a lamb, he was to sacrifice his son.
Like you do.
By the way, I told that story in person to someone recently who didn't know it. And they were appalled.
I think more people
and I was like,
know that
I've grown up hearing
than,
this from the time I was, 2.
Taught this in, Sunday school.
Yeah.
Little children.
Or earlier. Made perfect sense to me.
But, there are so many alternate versions to the fairy tale where he does go through with it and actually kills the kids. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I want to see the alternate versions of the Abraham Isaac story.
I want to see those too. Where is that cutting room floor?
Kill Isaac.
Where is that cutting room floor?
God's like, I didn't think you'd actually do it.
Oh my
what the
God.
Hell? Who would kill their own son?
What do you think you're doing? You just killed your kid?
I was joking.
Hey, wait, that gives me an idea.
You can't do that. I have to do that.
I'm going to do that.
This is the first act.
That's my thing.
My thing.
That's my thing.
Totally stealing my thunder here, Abraham.
Exactly.
Jesus Christ. Another flood. Bring the flood. Start over.
Redo.
Back to 1, everybody. From the top.
Oh my God. Who knew we'd go there from a fairy tale?
How can you not?
Back around the Midnight Society campfire, David remarks that that's disgusting.
Besmear
the
me?
besmearing.
That's disgusting.
And Frank enters, already shitting on the whole thing, presumably just because he saw Kristen's book and costume.
Fairy tales? Weak, Chris. Very weak.
Weak? Have you ever read these things?
Not the wimpy versions, the original ones.
No, can't say I have.
Get out of here, Frank.
Kristen and David jump in, defending the fairy tales, and Gary's entrance brings gravity to the squabble in a way only the older, wiser Gary can.
Yeah, the leader can come in and go, I've heard the stories.
I have. They're full of stabbings and demons and man-eating animals, and cutting off limbs and whatnot. Cool stuff.
I know you're gonna get to the scary tales thing, but like
I'm on my way. I'm on my way.
I'm just
he's champing at the bit.
Ooh.
You know, I learned that the other day. It's champing, not chomping.
It's not chomping. It's
nope,
champing.
Champing means to feel it. You're feeling it, touching it, manipulating it.
So was it the British people who screwed it up, saying they're chomping at the bit?
I don't know
Chomping.
exactly. It's just over time. And less people dealing with horses and bits, probably.
I'm blaming the British. It's actually probably the Americans who changed it to chomping.
We're all a mess.
I'm champing. I'm
Language.
champing at the bit. Ooh, that's a
Champing
great. That's a great
whiskey glass.
name for a wine bar.
Champing at the bit.
Champing at the bit.
Hmm.
Oh my God.
You have so many ideas in so little time.
Champs-Élysées.
My favorites, the one where the old woman kidnaps the prince and puts blood on the queen's mouth while she sleeps to make the king think she ate him.
That's so gross. I love it.
Rock and roll, man. That's awesome.
This quote and this idea is actually buried inside another Grimm Brothers published tale from even earlier in 1812.
Oh.
And it's in Arne Thompson type 451, The Maiden Who Seeks Her Brothers. Other tales of this type include The Seven Ravens, 12 Wild Ducks, Udea and her 7 brothers, the Wild Swans, and the 12 brothers. So
5 golden
scholars and folktale catalogs
rings,
report
4 calling birds, 3 French hens, 2 turtle doves,
Thank you.
and
Thanks
a
for that.
partridge and a pear tree. Am I wrong?
Scholars and folktale catalogs report variants of this tale type across Europe, the Middle East, and even India and Japan.
Wow. Okay.
Although the number of brothers and their animal form vary between tales. You ready for this?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Buckle up.
I mean,
It's a doozy.
this is what we're here for. So
The story begins with a king who gets lost in a forest while hunting, and he encounters an old witch who offers to guide him out of the forest on the condition that he marries her daughter.
okay.
Desperate to return to his kingdom, the king reluctantly agrees. The witch's daughter becomes his queen, but she turns out to be a wicked stepmother to his children from his first marriage, 6 sons and 1 daughter.
Huh.
Fearing for their safety, the king hides his children in a secluded castle deep in the forest, visiting them in secret. However, the queen discovers the king's secret, and in her jealousy, she learns witchcraft to harm the children. She sews 6 magical shirts, and throwing them over the boys, turns them into swans.
Wow.
The princess manages to escape, but her brothers are doomed to live as swans, only regaining their human forms for a few hours each night.
So it's like wereswans, but in reverse, because they turn back
Yes,
into
they turn back into people.
men.
So
Yeah.
were-swans,
in reverse.
the opposite of that. Determined to break the curse, the princess learns from a fairy that she can save her brothers by remaining silent for 6 years and weaving 6 shirts out of starwort, a delicate plant.
Stopwatch.
Despite the enormous difficulty of the task, the princess sets out to gather starwort and begins weaving in silence. During this time, a young king discovers the princess in the forest, and enchanted by her beauty and determination, he takes her to his castle and marries her, all without her saying a word.
Yeah.
I don't
Like
love
a
this.
good woman does.
I don't love these implications. I don't love
Yeah.
it. Also, hello, Ariel, is that you? However,
She can't speak, yeah.
this princess's, now queen's, continued silence and mysterious activities arouse suspicion in the court. There's always suspicion in the court.
There's always suspicion in my
And
court.
her new mother-in-law accuses her of witchcraft. A year later, after the queen had brought her first child into the world, the old woman, her mother-in-law, took the child away from her while she was asleep and smeared her mouth with blood. Then the mother-in-law went to the king and accused this princess, queen, of being a cannibal.
Wow.
The king could not believe this and would not allow anyone to harm her. However, she sat the whole time sewing on the shirts and caring for nothing else.
Huh.
The next time, when she again gave birth to a beautiful boy, the deceitful mother-in-law did the same thing again. But the king still could not bring himself to believe her accusations. He said she's too pious and good to do anything like that, and if she were not speechless, she could defend herself, and her innocence would come to light. So this man is defending his wife, which is great.
Hey, good for him.
Saying, like, she's too good and pious. How does he know? She can't talk.
He just knows.
She's too pretty, I think, is what it boils down to. But
he just wants to put it in her so bad. He has to believe that she is good.
Right.
Above
That's
all
what
else.
I'm seeing here as well. Mm-hmm. But again, the princess is still unable to defend herself. And at this point, she's condemned to be burned at the stake.
Yeah.
On the day of her execution, her 6 years of silence happen to come to an end. And as she's led to the stake, she finishes the last shirt just in time. She throws the shirts over her brothers, transforming them back into humans. However, the last shirt is not quite complete, which leaves the youngest brother with one swan wing.
I just want to hear his story.
What's
the boy
his
with
life
the one
like?
swan wing.
That's its own fairy tale. It should be anyway. The princess then breaks her silence, explaining everything. The king is filled with relief and joy, and the wicked mother-in-law is punished. And the princess, her brothers, and the king live happily ever after. At least no children were actually eaten in the making of this fairy tale.
No children were harmed.
Although they may have been killed. It doesn't actually say. And there are so many variants that I guarantee that there are some versions where they are and some where they're not. But
yeah, I'm sure.
Overall, it was just a plot by the mother-in-law.
Conniving bitch.
They say that the moral of the Six Swans focuses on themes of perseverance and sacrifice and familial love, and the princess's unwavering commitment to saving her brothers despite the enormous personal cost. Her silence symbolizes the endurance and patience required to overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges. And this story also, much like Faithful John, warns against making hasty judgments based on appearances or incomplete information.
Oh, yeah, that's very important.
Also highlights the importance of understanding and compassion and giving people that you love the benefit of the doubt sometimes.
I'm not buying it. A kitty story's a kitty story, no matter how you cut it.
And I, for one, would like to let Frank hear our podcast, wouldn't you?
I just want to know his reasoning. He's just determined to not be impressed.
Right?
It's like they're talking about smearing blood and eating children. And he's like,
old hat. That's fine.
If it's for kids, I don't want it.
Yeah.
Like, little does he know that his show is for children. It's about scary stories for kids.
He has no idea.
And apparently for
our darklings.
Grown children like us.
Kiki, arriving late, sides with Frank, worried that Kristen plans to tell some tired old fairy tale. And if you'd been here a minute ago, Kiki, you would have heard that that's not the case.
The story I'm going to tell is about a girl who loved fairy tales. She had a huge collection. She knew most of them by heart. The trouble was, she spent so much time thinking about the world of make-believe that she started to forget the difference between reality and imagination. And when you do that, a fairy tale can soon become a scary tale.
When you wish upon a star, is it your fault if the magical entity shows up and murders your entire family and all your friends?
And most stories that we've heard would say yes. Yes, it is.
It's not your fault, guys. Listen, if you take one thing away from this sermon today, this is the one thing you need to keep in mind and in your heart to stay right with the Lord. Mm-hmm. It's that.
And your ghost host.
Magical entity murders your whole family.
It's not your fault.
It's not your fault for wishing to be alone.
If only Sam and Dean Winchester could have heard that. It would have saved them like a decade of hunting stuff.
I made my family disappear.
And of course, Kristen saying scary tale is pretty funny because that is what DJ was originally thinking that he might call the series altogether.
Yes, exactly. We talked about this in our intro to Are You Afraid of the Dark? And we cut a lot of the Nickelodeon stuff, I think, but a lot of the Nickelodeon stuff was in there because it was our introduction to the whole network. Mm-hmm. And yeah, it was going to be quote unquote tired old fairy tales told by a tired old man sitting in front of a fire with the book. Mm-hmm. And he was going to call it Scary Tales. Mm-hmm. And the network said, no, that's old hat. That's boring.
Would have loved it.
And so he
could do it today, you know?
He got to kick ass with season 1 and come back to open season 2, just rubbing it in their faces.
Mm-hmm. And it's not the only thing I think that he kind of rubs in their face, but we will get to that when we are exiting our Midnight Society campfire.
But it's just so cool to me that he gets to come full circle with it. And clearly the production value is higher. Clearly he has a bigger budget.
Tell. Mm-hmm.
There's so much more he's able to do, and he's earned the trust of the network, and he gets to just kind of tongue-in-cheek talk about some of the most gruesome things we've heard in a TV show for kids.
I am so excited to say these words again.
Submitted
For the approval of the Midnight
of the
Society.
Midnight Society. I call this story
The Tale of the Final Wish.
Tale of the Final Wish.
Hot damn, dude. It's so good to be back. It's so
we're
good.
back. We're so back. We're locked in, as the kids would say. We are locked in. The story opens on a dream sequence, which is always spooky and disorienting.
Always.
It seems akin to Snow White, with a seemingly sweet woman begging the camera, the audience's point of view, to have a taste of her pretty apple.
Go ahead, my dear. Have a taste. Such a pretty apple.
She then spins around and reveals herself to be a wicked witch. I know you're making that face, and I know I said it on purpose, but I just said it as a passing
You
joke.
must take a bite. For if you don't,
I'll have to.
I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying it was suggestive. I'm not saying it was sexual in the least. I'm not saying any of that.
I am not saying that
I'm
it
not
was
gonna comment.
sexual in the least. However, I am saying that when you watch it in your 30s, other things come to mind.
I couldn't say that. Couldn't say.
This jolts our story's lead, Jill, awake, and we see that she's fallen asleep with her book open, which appears to be a common occurrence. Jill, surrounded by the white wicker furniture that I think all of us had as girls in the 90s, I know I did,
Dude, yeah, I know.
is played by Samantha Chermarica. Samantha had very few other credits, a couple of TV appearances prior to this and one credit after as additional crew on 28 Days Later, of all things. She does come back to visit Are You Afraid of the Dark, though, as Sharon in The Tale of the Chameleons. That's the Tia and Tamara Mowry episode.
That one got me.
That one got a lot of people.
That one really bothered me a lot.
Yeah. Oh, hi, buddy. I have a Buzz. A Buzz wants to be in my lap. Somebody shouted Buzz out on the
They
YouTube
love
the other
hearing
day.
Buzz.
They commented that they love to hear Buzz, and I told him that he has a fan out there. So if you love Buzz too, be sure to let him
Show
know.
him
He
some
really
love.
likes that. My cat Buzz Lightyear is a big fan of all of the people that are fans of him. He might never say that, and he will always hide if he sees you, but
Yeah.
doesn't mean he doesn't love you.
He plays humble.
Yeah.
He plays hard to get.
It's true. Jill goes to get out of bed for a drink of water, but stops short, peering over the edge as if something might grab her, eventually posturing with a handy bedside baseball bat.
You know what I have at my bedside?
A handy dandy baseball bat?
A machete. A handy dandy machete.
You do what you gotta do.
Yeah.
Suspenseful music underscores her checking under the bed skirt to reveal nothing.
No, I'm not convinced. It was pitch black under there. She didn't look hard enough.
She didn't look very hard.
Get a flashlight.
She tells herself,
You gotta grow up, Jill.
Get a flashlight.
and when she returns, she clearly wants to check again, almost in like a compulsive type of way, but instead sits on the bed and tries to reassure herself.
This is stupid. There's nothing under there.
Of course, like clockwork, a hand shoots out from under the bed and grabs her by the ankle.
Dude.
She runs screaming into her parents' room, and they're exasperated, telling her it was all just a dream. We've said this before, but I think if a child woke me up screaming like that, I probably wouldn't sleep again for months.
Yeah, something grabbed me.
In that dramatic of a fashion, I don't think I would get back to sleep that evening, or maybe ever again.
I think I'd be up on high alert for a while.
But these guys,
We've said this before, yeah.
they're old pros.
I'm always going to like err on the side of caution and believe my child because
Same
like
here.
you never really know.
No. And again, there may be a reason for what's happening beyond just the it's all a dream explanation.
Right.
Her dad goes to check and employs the classic dad maneuver, pretending to be pulled under the bed by the leftover dessert plate from a week prior.
What a douche.
I never kept dishes in my room like that. Like if I kept dishes in my room,
I
they
never-
certainly
I
never
never
made it
kept
under my
food.
bed, but I know that that's a thing. I'm not saying it's not.
I never kept food in my room.
Just
No
wasn't
way.
it didn't happen to me, really.
No, it's just
I guess people might try to hide the evidence if they got like a second helping of dessert or something, but I don't know. My parents wanted me to eat, so they didn't ever really care.
You've never seen the Yeti movie I've mentioned on the show, starring
No.
Meatloaf.
No.
One of the movies me and my sister watched over and over and over, but in one of the earlier scenes, they go bring Meatloaf, who's in the shower, a slice of pumpkin pie. She walks into the room, sets the pie on the floor,
Mhm.
on the carpet, to leave for him,
Mm-hmm.
so that he'll see it when he comes out of the shower.
And he steps on it?
No.
No.
That's just what it made me think of.
Couldn't tell you. Not my instinct.
I also couldn't stop thinking about how terrified I used to be as a kid when I would get up in the middle of the night to go get a glass of water. I had to go into my kitchen, which I ended up just going to the bathroom. eventually because it was too scary to go to the kitchen, because I saw The Sixth Sense way too young. And I knew if I went into the kitchen and turned the light on, I was going to see that woman with her slit wrists telling me I couldn't hurt her anymore.
Horrible.
And so I just opted out.
Yeah, I was thankfully older when I saw that one, because that would have probably stuck with me too.
Filtered kitchen water? No, thank you. Nope. I'm going to have the gross
bathroom sink water.
Unfiltered bathroom sink, lukewarm bathroom sink water.
Yep.
Good enough for me.
You got to take it that way every time.
I don't want to see no ghosts.
Her mom laughs, and I've got to say, these folks do have a pretty good sense of humor for the middle of the night. But of course, they are berating her, and Jill's frustrated because she's being made fun of and not believed whatsoever.
I think he's trying to convey the fact that this has happened probably every night for quite a while.
Right. It's kind of everybody's routine.
Now it's like, if I don't laugh, I'm going to kill you.
While they're talking, her brother John appears blearily in the hallway. Too blearily.
A little bit too convincing.
Jill, we all have nightmares. You just can't take them so seriously.
Go back to bed.
Once her parents have retreated back to their room, John smirks.
Gotcha.
It was you? Mom!
And Jill tries to call for her mom pretty loudly. I would have heard it if I were
And
her
she
mom.
didn't come back, I know.
But John wrestles her back and closes the door, telling her not to be such a snitch.
I hate you! Why did you do that?
Thought you wanted to find something under the bed. You're always looking.
Right.
Youch.
Be careful what you wish for. But it's always the shitty older brother.
Yeah, every
making
time.
fun of you. But my question is, if she's 13 and he's the older brother, how old is he and why hasn't his voice changed yet?
I don't know. He looks to be like 14 or 15.
That's my question.
He didn't act anymore. That's for sure. He had no more acting credits.
Hey.
But
probably had a serious medical condition and I'm just making fun of him.
Yeah, don't make fun of people. You don't... See? You can't be judging people based on actions that you don't know anything about. See?
That was how I was raised.
These are our fairy tale morals.
I was taught to do that.
She tells... Well, I was taught to do that too.
Why don't you just grow up?
Me? You're the one who's still living in a fairyland, princess. You're 13 years old. Listen to the radio. Go to a concert or something. Stop being a kid, and maybe you won't be scared of boogeymen under the bed anymore.
I hate to break it to both of them, but not only can you grow up while enjoying the radio and concerts and fairy tales.
Yeah,
that's also not exactly how these primal under the bed sorts of fears work.
No, of course not.
Because if it wasn't this, it would definitely be something else.
Yeah, I mean, how many times have I gotten off feeling and I have just scorched my house looking for any sign of a human being, any kind of presence at all that had been here while I was away.
Yeah. These things are not things that leave us. We modify our behaviors maybe.
I get up, I grab my machete, I go room to room, I backtrack.
Yes, you're hearing this right, Darklings.
I go in each room, I go clear, and just to my cats, just so that they know.
Christian paces his house at night with a machete like he's a final girl.
I am always the final girl. I am the final girl.
I'm not. We all know it.
I'm final girl Christian Mott, and I'm one of your hosts this evening.
If you want to know who the family is played by, I would love to tell you now. Jane Wheeler plays Miss Peterson, and she probably has the most credits of this cast, including an episode each of Lassie and Barney's Great Adventure, 8 episodes of Arthur, and a return to Are You Afraid of the Dark as well in The Tale of C7.
Cool, okay.
Ian Finley is Mr. Peterson, who has among his credits a CBP officer role in The Terminal, which is one of my favorite Tom Hanks movies, and his own 2 episodes of Arthur, among lots of other stuff. But again, I never know how much to say and how much you want to know.
You never know.
So I do my best to tell you what's relevant.
Was The Terminal the one where he's locked in the airport? He has to stay there because he can't leave because he doesn't have a passport or something?
Correct. Yes.
I had a dream last night that I was traveling via airplane twice a day for like a job or something. And I think in the last rendition of the travel experience, I think the plane crashed.
Oh, so you're back and forth, back and forth.
And that's how back and forth, exhausted.
Yeah.
Constant jet lag.
Well, here we are talking about dreams, and we could have interpreted that for you if
but
I had not had time to look it up.
The plane crashed and I woke up.
Yikes.
Last night.
My brother-in-law is a pilot, and he does do that all the time.
Crashes planes?
Does not crash planes that I know of.
Thank God.
But he does go back and forth like that for work, so I'll tell him to be on the lookout. And as I said, the actor playing John, Thomas Sievewright, has not one other credit to his name.
It's too bad.
Jill, come on!
We cut to the next morning in this very, very nice middle-class house with an ornate staircase as Mom and Dad are hustling and bustling and screaming up said staircase for Jill, worried that they'll be late for the bus.
The wood paneling, but you know what it is.
The wood paneling.
2-income household.
It is a double income household. You're correct.
I think this may be the first time we've seen two parents.
And a double income
working.
went a lot further than it does now.
Yeah.
As we watch Jill trying on a denim bucket hat a la Blossom or Debbie Gibson or, for the purist, Robin Sparkles in the mirror, she's brushing her hair and exclaiming, yuck.
Jill was having a rough time. Everyone kept telling her to grow up and act your age, but she didn't know how to grow up any faster. And she wasn't exactly sure how kids her age were supposed to act.
I feel like this probably hit home for a lot of us as we were trying to grow into ourselves watching this show. It's really hard to do.
Yeah.
We talked about a lot of these puberty reflections in our Labyrinth series, also featuring detached parents screaming up a very similar staircase. This is such a difficult part of life because we only make this transition once, and it always comes more quickly than is comfortable. We get no practice rounds, and by the time most grown-ups are in a position to be helping us through it, they're not only navigating adulthood for the first time, but they're seemingly too far removed to remember what the in-between feels like. Or, at least the grown-ups around us in the 80s and 90s seem to be.
What did we talk about? How years ago at this point, it was like being like your teenage years, being a teenager is like an early life crisis. It is a crisis period.
And it may have been Labyrinth where we talked about that because this growing up part of life is so in between because you're not any of the things that you want to be or are supposed to be yet, or
you're fully unprepared.
You're not the things that you used to be. And exactly. And everybody walks into it unprepared because there's really no good way to prepare for it.
And that's why it's such a good thing to use in fiction, because the adults who are supposed to be helpful usually are completely unhelpful and make you feel worse about yourself. And that's why we romanticize and idealize that one adult that listens, that one teacher.
Yeah.
That will hear us out and give us guidance.
Seeing it portrayed like this in the 80s and 90s, kind of how it happened, to children of that time, we see how humans are kind of stuck in a cycle of being consumed by the weight of the adult world.
Ooh, yeah.
And so they're humans perpetually forgetting themselves and where they came from, both collectively and individually.
Good word.
I love an adverb, A lot can be said about Gen X and millennial folks, but I'd like to think that as in touch as we are with our own traumas, we're at least doing our damnedest to tune into the plights of the children in our lives. Not one generation before us knew how to parent either, but we are some of the first to openly admit that and strive to do it differently.
Right.
And I hope that Gen Alpha will be better for this, if the internet doesn't completely beat their brains to mush first.
Yeah. Worried about that.
In a caricature-esque moment, Jill's parents wonder aloud why she always does this.
Why does she always do this?
I don't know, but if she misses the bus again, it's your turn to drive her. But bye.
At this point, I'm talking to my TV, and I'm like, come on, parentals. You know you have a teenage girl on your hands. Like, you know it.
You know what's happening. Yeah.
And on that note, this feels to me far more like teenage behavior than the childishness that they try to play it for.
Right. She's actually
which is the first of several mixed messages that we get.
Kids don't care what they look like. They just get up, They throw on clothes, they go to school. They don't even fix their hair.
It could be argued, I guess, that she was late getting up because of the overnight mayhem, and that's why she's behind. But the way that it reads to me and the way that they show her in the mirror, it feels more like they're upset about her primping.
Yeah.
And that's what they're fed up with.
It's because her mother was never allowed to be feminine, and her older brother just never gave a shit about what he looked like or his hair or anything.
So this is the first time this family is experiencing this.
Any of them have ever dealt with this. Yeah. I know this very well. I don't remember Lindsay having much of this issue, but I remember my sister Lauren, for sure. This was our morning routine. Her trying to fix her hair, trying to get her bangs just right, trying to put on enough makeup to cover up the acne. We all had terrible acne, by the way.
I get it.
Me and her were both on Accutane. If you've ever taken Accutane, how did it f*** you up and how did it change your personality? Because it made me a depressed mofo. So
it does do that.
Definitely affected me.
It does be doing that.
But also ruined my cross-country career.
Screw you, Accutane.
But hey, look.
Your face is clear.
It's clear. But anyway, yeah, I'm very familiar with this. And it was very much like that. Like, we have to go. Hurry up. You're making us late.
Clearly, this is something that Jill's never been through before. And apparently, her family has never been through it either. So they should just recognize that they're all learning together. But instead, they're just all angry at each other.
Yep.
Regardless, Jill rushes down the stairs with a Canadian sorry, and her mom launches into a lecture.
Why do you do this? All I ask is that you get up and out on time. Now I'm going to have to drive you to school, and I'm going to be late for work again.
And Jill apologizes again. And her mom doubles down, even though she's already apologized twice.
I told you I'm sorry.
Don't ignore me. You are going to have to learn some responsibility, miss. Other people live in this house, and we're getting tired of putting up with your childishness.
And I'm like, she didn't ignore you, lady. She didn't. She apologized.
I knew you were going to bring this up.
Oh,
I knew it.
It's
what
so
she should have
gaslighty.
said, it is gaslighting.
If she wants to say you need to be more responsible, that's all she needs to say. She didn't ignore you. Leave the girl alone.
She's already having a hard morning.
As we were saying, like, I feel like they're all being pretty hard on the youngest member of their family. But I also know that that's how we're supposed to feel because we're seeing this from Jill's point of view. And we're supposed to be steeped in the injustice. So this is probably intentional. And I have more thoughts on that later. But I do have to say, granted, I was the older child and my younger sister picked on me. We're cool now. But when we were kids, she came at me very often and for no reason. And I got no joy. I've talked about this before on the show. I got no joy whatsoever out of picking on my younger sister. And she seemed to actually, very much enjoy doing it to me.
Sure.
So I'm coming at it from the perspective of the kid that gets picked on and reacts versus the kid that does the picking.
Yeah.
But to me, in this moment, I'm also thinking, John is the one that kept you awake because John's the one that was with her.
Yeah, they don't know that.
But they don't know that.
Right.
Because they didn't ask. They didn't care. They didn't take it that step further.
And when she screamed for them a second time, they ignored her. Yeah.
Right.
No, I'm telling you, middle-class families are known to shit on the youngest. And I was there. I went through it.
See,
they gave me a hard
that
time.
did not happen in my house because both my parents were youngest children and they related to the youngest child. But again, in my situation, it was a little bit different because the youngest child was the antagonist usually. So
I developed a stutter because of my mental and emotional abuse.
And I can't relate exactly, but I can relate a little bit because I definitely felt gaslit like that when I would say, she's doing this to me. And they'd be like, you're the oldest, be responsible. And I'm like,
yeah.
But how do I take responsibility for her behavior? Because I can't change her behavior. You can, and you're not doing so.
Yeah. What I got was, you're the boy. You're not supposed to cry.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's rough.
So stop making me cry.
Editing Christian can save us from this spiral of childhood trauma. It's been a minute, but it happens sometimes. This stuff gets to us.
Man, it's a Monday night if I've ever had one.
It's true. It's for me too. Later at the library, Jill is perusing the shelves and skimming a book on the Sandman, while her friends, and I'm using air quotes here, who are not even credited on IMDb, by the way.
I noticed that.
They are down bad, complete with a synchronized sigh, watching this kid across the room who's wearing a necktie, a button-down tucked into jeans, and a backwards denim cap.
It doesn't get cooler than that.
Very Will Smith of him. They say, he's so fine.
In West Philadelphia, born and raised.
He was raised in West Philadelphia.
He's so fine. I'd talk to him, but I'd probably drool or something.
Good Lord.
Aren't you guys being kind of obvious?
We're just looking.
Yeah, like a couple of silly gooses.
Looking like a couple of silly gooses.
Just a couple of silly gooses.
Geese, right? What do you say? Looking like a couple of silly
geese. Of silly geese.
Silly gooses.
I mean, but the term, no. You're actually incorrect because the proper noun, the term is silly goose.
Sure, you're right.
So
you're right.
If you're going to go capital S, capital G, silly goose.
Silly goose, silly gooses.
Silly gooses.
You're right. Nailed it.
Yeah.
English lessons.
If you need a new Grammar 101 professor in English,
look no further than
hire me.
You.
I don't have any credentials, so I'm not prepared.
You know how to English.
I'll be late. I'll be late to the class.
I'll be late every day.
At 8 a.m. But so will the students I'm teaching, so who really is going to notice? Not me.
Silly gooses? My grandmother says that.
And now I'm like, okay, Chloe, make up your mind. Is she too young or is she too old? And it's funny how sometimes that feels like the same thing. Really just any age that isn't thought of as being primarily sex-driven, I guess.
Hey, all right. Yeah.
Her friends, and again, I use that term loosely here, watch Jill walk away to sharpen her pencil, and Necktie Guy, not so subtly, turns to look as she passes, which enrages these girls who begin digging through her bag and laughing at the Mother Goose titles, calling her a baby.
Talk about us. We saw you flirt with him.
I didn't. I had to sharpen my pencil.
Yeah, right.
She clearly didn't. She just walked past him.
Yeah, right. Yeah, let's blame her for the guy
which is
ogling her.
Yeah, this is the 90s. So
it must have been what she was wearing. If she didn't want him to look at her, she shouldn't have worn the grandma dress she was wearing to school.
Oh boy, this is peak 90s. Blame the girl for everything all the time, even amongst the girls.
He's coming.
Hey, Jill.
Hi.
You have that reading assignment Kelly gave us yesterday? I lost it someplace.
When Necktie Guy comes over to innocently ask Jill about a class assignment, the girls use this opportunity to blast her apparently ridiculously childish book choices, which are pretty on par with what you or I might check out at the library on any given day.
Those are already on my home bookshelves.
Yeah.
These are on display in my living room. Like I have them out for people to look at.
We're proud of it.
They're coffee table material.
Poor Jill. We would take her in if we could. We would let her know. It gets better. It gets better.
This is why this episode's so on brand for us, because this is like we're asking the same questions. We're going to get to it. We're making the same wishes.
They also pull out her blue-haired troll doll, and Necktie, whose name is Rick, I guess, isn't really fazed by any of this, which is sort of sweet, but the taunting makes Jill uncomfortable, and she storms out embarrassed.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask, why do kids treat each other like this? And then I remembered, oh yeah, they're just getting their teenage feet under them, and there's a serious lack of emotional intelligence and emotional processing skills, and of course, good old hormones. Mm-hmm. And then I realized that a good chunk of the population still behave like this as adults, and that's great.
Yeah, you always forget that, like, you never really grow out of it. We want to say that's a teenage thing.
I never grew into it.
Out of it.
I couldn't wrap my head around treating other people like this, mainly because, again, the golden rule, and I didn't want to be treated like that.
Right. I was more often than not worried about being a good little Christian boy, but I do remember being holier than thou.
Yes.
More often than not.
That was more my issue.
So mine was more of a like, I'm better than you kind of thing. Because I'm more religious than you are, and go to heaven, and you're not. So joke's on me, I guess.
Meanwhile, I was supposed to be saving everybody around me, so
there's also that. Oh, I once walked someone through the sinner's prayer through AIM.
Nice.
To save her.
That's a rite of passage for some people.
And I thought, I got one.
I did it.
She was laughing at me the whole time. It was a joke. Thanks, Kelsey. Thanks, Kelsey.
Jill knew she was being kind of childish, but there was something inside her that didn't want to give up the world of fairy tales. Because in all those stories, no matter how bad things got, everyone always lived happily ever after. And the princess always got the prince.
This sentiment, to which I, and I'm sure a lot of you Darklings can relate, is interrupted by Jill's dream sequence, where Necktie Guy appears as a prince to awaken her, as if she's Sleeping Beauty. Only in true Are You Afraid of the Dark fashion, there's an abrupt shift to reality, where her brother is actually looming over her bed in a Halloween mask.
Oh, Jill, it's me.
I do love it, though.
This is the last straw for poor Jill, who rips him a new one.
Why did you do that? I got this for Halloween, and I just wanted to show you.
You did not. You wanted to scare me again.
No, really, I didn't mean.
Yes, you did. I hate you. I hate all of you.
I'm sorry. Jeez, don't get so bent out of shape.
Get out of here. Leave me alone.
No sweat. I'm gone.
And again, this all feels so gaslighting to me.
Gaslighting. I just wanted to show you my mask.
Oh my God.
I just wanted to show you.
We're all going to gang up on you to push every one of your buttons and tell you that you're growing up wrong. And then if you get upset, we're going to make it your fault.
Yeah.
Again, I'll talk about that more at the end, but
okay.
Frustrating.
This moment felt so Goosebumps to me. This was like quintessential Goosebumps.
Definitely. Jill kicks him out and sits by the window, asking herself,
"What's so wrong about wanting to live in a world where dreams come true and you can wish on a star?"
Me too.
What is so wrong about that?
Right? That's one of the first thing I wrote down. I was like, same.
I understand that there is or can be a maladaptive way to do it. Alexa, play I Hate It Here by Taylor Swift. But I really don't see it being that way for Jill at this point in her life, or even myself, or even Taylor Swift. We all have to survive this cruel world somehow, and we need to let the magic stay alive in whatever small ways that it can.
Yeah.
You know, that's my motto.
Where's the harm in clinging to some whimsy and some magic and some fantasy?
There isn't
what's
any.
The harm in clinging to storybooks and fairy tales and scary stories?
And of course, you know, these are the questions that this show seems to be asking. Like, when is that at the point where, you know, you're blending too much imagination and reality? And to that I say, who cares?
Who gives a shit? I love when people ask me, like, well, like, what do you like to write? What do you like to read? Like, what's your thing? I'm like, honestly, my favorite kind of story is a ghost story. That's it. And they kind of go, huh, okay. All right, that's kind of cool, I guess. Like, they think, people think of ghost stories as childish for some reason.
They do.
And they're not. It's one of
they're not at all.
first stories ever told was a ghost story.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as humans could sit down and think for themselves, when they were no longer in survival mode, it was ghost stories. They started thinking about the people who had died.
Yeah.
They started to think about how they were alone because the people that they had loved and relied on had passed.
Right.
And now they feel so alone and so scared
that they make up ghost stories.
That they begin to think, what actually happens when you do die?
Mm-hmm.
Do you go away? Do you stay around? And
here?
It's easier to remember people as though they're still here and then to assume that they're just dissipated and gone.
Yep.
Thus, the ghost story. It's one of the first stories.
Not childish, damn it.
Not childish at all. It's human nature. It's in our soul.
And I think you're right. I think what's the harm in clinging to these stories, whatever kind of stories that, make your soul feel something.
Right. If it makes this life easier, why not?
We are not two grown-ups that are going to sit here and shit on Jill for this because we're two grown-ups that do the same thing.
It's why we have the podcast. This is why it exists.
Mm-hmm.
This is why you guys are listening.
Exactly.
Because you cling to it too. Thank God we're not alone.
I wish I could. And I wish everybody would just leave me alone.
Jill makes an honest-to-goodness wish at this point.
On an actual star.
Labyrinth style, before placing her Sandman book on the dresser and returning to bed. And now we are in real Are You Afraid of the Dark territory as a metronome ticks in the darkness. And she wakes again to the whooshing empty sound effects and a sudden flash where John appears standing by her bedside again, but his eyes closed and his head droops.
John! That's it! I'm telling! You're gonna get it!
Very scary.
Was it just me or was this one of the most terrifying visuals in the whole episode?
Very horror film.
Because it got me a little bit. I was like, oh.
Very horror film.
Oh.
Yes.
Imagine that happening in life. Like somebody just standing next to your bed.
No, worst nightmare.
Absolutely
worst nightmare.
Terrifying. Doesn't matter what they're doing, really.
Someone standing in the doorway of my bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
Someone standing next to my bed.
Mm-hmm.
Someone in my bed with me.
Mm-hmm.
These are the three things I think about every time I wake up in the middle of the night. I don't want any of them.
Three places you don't want to see a figure.
Her brother was the second worst one, next to the bed.
Escalating.
That's it.
Series of fear. But then John disappears, and Jill rushes to her parents' room to tell on him. But, gasp, her parents aren't in their bed.
They're also gone.
And now we get this stomach-sick feeling of your parents not being where they're supposed to be. It's a feeling that still creeps into my life on occasion, even in my 30s. She eases down the stairs in the darkness, calling for her family, and then returns to her room where she begs John to come out from under her bed. Instead, she comes face to face with the Sandman, played by Bobcat Goldthwait.
Bobcat Goldthwait.
What a man, what a name.
This guy.
We got to talk about Bobcat.
Rent-free in my mind. All the time.
You and a lot of other people.
I love him and hate him at the same time. But he's always there. He's always stuck doing his
yeah, that's
thing.
Bobcat. Let me tell you a little bit about this man. Bobcat was rising to fame as a comedian in the 80s. And this dude has dozens and dozens of credits, including as the voice of Pain in Hercules.
Yeah, I noticed that.
The TV series, too, among several others for Disney. An episode of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Buzz Lightyear of Star Command, Adventure Time, Aqua Teen Hunger Force, and more.
He's done so much.
He also directed the music video for Kink's Shirt, which is one of my absolute favorite Matt Nathanson songs.
He actually has an extensive directing career.
He's done a lot of directing. Go figure.
I want to hear his normal voice. I want to hear how he actually talks.
As IMDb says, he's most widely known for his at times screechy voice and scattergun delivery during his stand-up comedy performances and some of his film roles. One of his TV specials was literally titled, "Is He Always Like That?"
I looked up his stand-up. There was the first time he was on David Letterman. And it is one of the most cringe-worthy things I've ever seen.
I didn't look up any of his stand-up because I was like, I have already heard this man speak enough today. And I watched the episode like 3 times. So I was I had met my Bobcat quota. I was like, I'm done.
It's a bit much. It got laughs the whole time.
Wow.
But it just was supposed to be cringy on purpose, right?
Right. It's played for cringe.
I just couldn't. I stopped it halfway.
He's one of a kind.
I couldn't finish it.
Jill screams and tries to run, but it's no use as she's pulled under the bed and through some kind of dream vortex into the Sandman's echoey dream domain.
You know, I'm not even going to shit on this, the CGI, the special effects there.
I'm not either.
Because the practical effects of her being sucked under the bed were so good.
Thank you. I
was so impressed.
Go
by
right
this.
ahead, because that's what I had here. I was like, these practical effects are actually really great.
I remember being very impressed by the Zeebo when they inflated the balloon under the door, somehow tied it off and released the balloon with the string on
We
it.
talked about that
very
at
impressive.
length. Yeah.
Her being lifted and sucked under the bed was on par.
Mm-hmm.
Her floating in midair, on par.
It was great.
And they used the same thing they had to have with the sleeping people in the dream, the Land of Nod.
Just suspended.
They must have used the same effect,
Because yes,
same gimmick.
Now we're here in the Land of Nod with all of these gears and clocks spinning in all directions, and a bunch of people that we've never met before suspended midair in sleep. There is something so distinctly 80s, 90s about this mostly practically built set.
The studio, yeah.
Because there's all this fog and there are obvious props, these doors, columns, clocks. It feels also very theatrical.
Right.
Like, this is just people playing pretend on a soundstage.
It's on a stage.
And it feels good to me. It feels like home to me because this is a lot of what I grew up with. Like,
this is what we're here
there
for.
were Barney movies that were like this. There were like,
dude, the bed, the Barney movie with the bed when the room falls apart and the bed turns into a ship. I love that movie.
That's exactly the one I was thinking of.
I love that movie.
I watched this. I watched that so many times. My sister and I both.
We watched it over and over. God, what a magical dream that was. Childhood.
It makes me really sad that we don't really get this kind of vibe anymore in media, because even the practical sets, not only are they, incredibly well done,
there's so much
they're
money
also
now.
Blended in so well with CGI.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of like a Stranger Things.
Yeah, of course.
We feel like we are totally immersed in a world that doesn't exist.
We're in the upside down.
Right.
100%.
And it's just a different thing. It's still beautiful and really cool to watch, but it's not like this,
We're going to get our own. We're going to bring the kids' horror anthology back. I have so many ideas.
We've talked about it for so long.
I'm just telling you right now.
Jill wanders among the sleeping and enters a giant door labeled with a Z, which here in my notes I said, Zeebo, is that you?
Zeebo.
It opens into some approximation of a throne room with a purple carpet leading up to a giant metronome surrounded by hourglasses and a collection of sand for different purposes. Deep sleep, 40 winks, catnap, snooze, out like a light. And as Jill goes to inspect an hourglass, the Sandman shrieks,
"Don't touch that! You'll ruin everything!"
Who are you?
Who do you think I am? Take a guess.
You're the guy under my bed.
That's it? My entire persona described as that guy under your bed? I think you can do a little better than that.
This is a dream. I've got to be dreaming.
You're getting warmer, but you're only half right. This place is a dream, but you're not dreaming.
The Sandman begins to speak in verse. He says,
"The strangest things are there for me, both things to eat and things to see, and many frightening sights abroad, till morning in the Land of Nod."
Yeah.
And this verse is from a poem called The Land of Nod.
Oh, no shit.
By the Scottish Robert Louis Stevenson.
Oh, wow.
In 1885.
I love Robert Louis Stevenson.
Yes. The Treasure Island and Jekyll and Hyde guy.
When I was in Savannah recently, I ate at the Pirate's House restaurant. It's one of the haunted places on a list of 9 haunted places you should, visit.
So you were obligated.
I had to go. Also pirates, because who doesn't love that? And there's a bunch of illustrations from, Treasure Island and everything. Because apparently he was like, his history coincides with Savannah's history for some reason.
Well, I'm going to tell you some stuff about him.
Okay, let's hear it.
Poetryfoundation.org had a really great bio for him and these works, which I think sort of apply here in our pretty dark universe.
A map of an imaginary island, created when he joined the artist his stepson at the easel, gave Stevenson the idea for the first story, and a nightmare supplied the premise of the second. These tales also share Stevenson's key theme, the impossibility of identifying and separating good and evil. Treasure Island's Long John Silver is simultaneously a courageous friend and a treacherous cutthroat, and Dr. Jekyll, who is not wholly good but a mixture of good and evil, is eventually ruled by Hyde because of his own moral weakness. With Silver, Jekyll, and others, Stevenson set standards for complex characterization that were adopted by later writers. His method of rendering ambiguous, enigmatic personalities was one of Stevenson's greatest literary contributions. And I agree because, God damn it, I love Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Mm-hmm.
What a contribution
I know you do.
to the history of horror and folklore and science fiction and all the works.
The man knew what he was talking about, and I'm really excited to share his history with somebody that loves him. This nod with the poem, yes, pun intended, in my opinion, fits with Chloe's themes of dreamlike in-betweenness and the acknowledgement, reverence, and respect that he has for the gray areas.
And funny you say the gray areas because the band I'm listening to while recording is the band Forever Grey.
See, it all connects.
It all connects.
It's always been fascinating to me the way that Stevenson seems dedicated to exploring that duality.
Yeah.
So I did a little more diving to understand this man behind Jekyll and Hyde. And we didn't have time for it during Pagemaster, so I thought, why not now?
And we did it again at some point with Michael Jackson's Thriller. I read some quotes from
Robert Louis
The
Stevenson.
Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Yes. So we now have talked a lot about Jekyll and Hyde, so we might as well talk about Mr. Stevenson.
Absolutely.
While I've always appreciated his contributions to literature, I'd never really read much on Stevenson's life. But looking into it, he feels kind of kindred.
Yeah.
He grew up in a sickbed due to weak lungs, save when he spent summers playing outdoors with his cousins. Most sources say Stevenson was 6 years old when, competing against his cousins, he won a prize from one of his Balfour uncles for a history of Moses.
Okay.
His next composition was The Book of Joseph. Stevenson's first published work, The Pentland Rising, was also on religious theme, recounting an unsuccessful rebellion by Covenanters in 1666. Stevenson wrote the account when he was 16, and his father had the pamphlet published at his own expense. As these compositions show, young Stevenson was tremendously influenced by the strong religious convictions of his parents.
Yeah.
During his college years, however, his beliefs underwent a sharp reversal. He had attended school since he was 7, but his attendance was irregular because of his poor health, and his father doubted the value of formal education.
Wow.
Stevenson entered university when he was 16, planning to become a lighthouse engineer like his father.
Oh, hell yeah.
Instead of applying himself to his studies, he became known for his outrageous dress and behavior. He sported a wide-brimmed hat and a boy's velveteen coat, and Stevenson was called Velvet Jacket at school.
Well, Velveteen Rabbit. Velvet Jacket.
In the company of his cousin Bob, Stevenson smoked hashish and visited brothels, and at age 22, he declared himself an agnostic, crowning his father's disappointment in him. In order to try and appease his father, who he had gravely disappointed,
haven't we all?
Stevenson studied law. He was called to the bar in 1875, but he never practiced. While at university, Stevenson had trained himself to be a writer by imitating the styles of authors William Hazlitt and Daniel Defoe, among others.
Daniel Defoe.
Before and after receiving his law degree, Stevenson's essays were published in several periodicals. He was a constant traveler for most of his adult life, with his travels inspiring many of his works, and his journeys were often searches for climates that would help to ease his poor health. But he also had an innate wanderlust. This led him to America to pursue a woman, and he suffered for it, but he eventually won her over when she divorced her husband to be with him in 1880.
Wow, he got the win.
And I know that I'm spending a lot of time talking about Stevenson, but does he not share similarities with so many of the authors and creators who find themselves inside of our sound waves?
Yeah, he's right up there.
The sand falls through the hourglass.
Wow.
And these human patterns just repeat and repeat and repeat.
Was that your quote?
Yeah, that's me.
Well, it's pretty good.
Thanks. That was a Galen original.
You should be proud of that one. That was nice. That was nice.
Thank you. Jill, for one, is frustrated by the poetry, exclaiming that she doesn't want to hear riddles. She's scared and she wants to know where she is. Maybe like some of you darklings while I discuss Mr. Stevenson.
You're in the land of Nod, where everyone goes to dream.
Land of Nod? And who are you?
Isn't it obvious? I'm the Sandman.
The Sandman.
The Man of Sand.
It's time. Ladies, gents, and
To
gentlemen.
talk about the Sandman?
To talk about some Sandman lore.
It's pretty dark, y'all.
It's pretty dark. The Sandman's origins are distinctly European, namely Scandinavian, German, and Dutch.
Oh, schnickel.
In 18th century Germany, the expression Der Sandman kommt, meaning the Sandman is coming, became a popular way to describe someone who looks very sleepy.
Yeah.
The initial Wikipedia sentence states,
Sandman is coming.
The Sandman is a traditional character in many children's stories and books. In Scandinavian folklore, he's said to sprinkle sand or dust on or into the eyes of children at night to bring on sleep and dreams.
Mm-hmm.
This grit or sleep in one's eyes upon waking is the supposed result of the Sandman's work the previous night.
Which isn't the word for that like rheum?
Yes.
Yeah.
Rheum.
Yeah.
Not what we called it growing up. We just called it sleep. But
just sleep.
A lot of people call it a lot of different things.
Is that a real thing or is that colloquial? Do Southerners just call that sleep?
There are literally like 15 things people call it.
Okay, because down here in the South, guys, we called it sleep. You got sleep in your eyes.
That's what we said.
I had no idea that was the origins of the Sandman myth.
It sure is.
In old Germany, the old Dutch legend of Sandman.
I didn't know you were going to bring this up, but I do have the list of things that this can be called colloquially. So
let's
if you
hear
read that, you can.
I want to read it. Yeah.
I knew you would. This, of course, does not account for where all of these things come from or where in geography people use them, but
okay, so I'll just read them off. Spitfire, sleep, sleepy seeds, sleepy buds, sleepy bugs, sleepy sand, sleepy winks, eye boogers, I've heard that plenty of times, Sandman sand, eye goop, sleepy dust, sleepies, eye gunk, yep, eye crust, yeah, sleepy men, crusties, dozy dust, eye globs, sleepy dirt. I am one sleepy man myself on the reg.
Is anyone else grossed out by that?
See, it's funny. Eye boogers is like when they're kind of like still soft. Like I get eye boogers during the day. When you're tired, you know, you're like, oh, there's an eye booger.
When you wake up, it's harder.
But when you wake up and it's crusty, that to me, that's sleep.
Really what it is a lot of different mucus.
Of course.
From your body and dust that collects because it's not being cleared away by your natural blinking action.
Well, yeah, I mean, your eyes produce liquid. We know this.
Yeah.
That's why I've always been deathly afraid of having my eyelids cut off. Have you never thought about this? That's been a form of punishment for numerous people across history is to have your eyelids removed. You go blind. Your eyes shrivel.
I've heard about the tongue,
but
not really so much the
gift
eyelids.
of sight.
Okay, we have grossed everyone out now, and we're not even halfway through our Sandman conversation.
Speaking of eyes.
As with most fairy tales of the like, the Sandman character seems to have originated as a way for parents of centuries ago to cope with child rearing and to encourage their children, please, for the love or threat of the Sandman, to go to sleep.
Like that book, Go to Sleep.
As a kid, the idea of someone putting sand in my eyes was the furthest thing from soothing. And I'm sure I'm not the only one to feel that way, but I guess I kind of get it because it is a cute little explanation for the way that we wake up.
Sure.
As is the theme here, though.
It's also creepy.
Many of the earliest Sandman stories are far from cute.
Yes.
The earliest written story about the Sandman is rather sinister. E.T.A. Hoffman, who lived 1776 to 1822, was born in the same year as America, wrote a short story in 1816 titled Der Sandman.
Yep.
According to the protagonist nurse, he threw sand in the eyes of children who would not sleep, and the result being those eyes falling out and being collected by the Sandman, who then takes the eyes to his iron nest on the moon, which cue metal guitar sounds.
On the dark side of the moon, yeah.
And uses them to feed his children.
Guys, the Sandman steals children's eyes. If you won't sleep...
Close your eyes or the Sandman's gonna take them.
Sandman is coming.
Der Sandman cometh.
Hey, guys, that's pretty dark.
It's pretty dark. The protagonist of the story grows to associate this nightmarish creature with the genuinely sinister figure of his father's associate, Copolis. In Romanian folklore, there's a similar character called Mosin, or In the Elder.
Okay.
And Hoffman's version of the Sandman is also similar to the French-Canadian character known as the Bonhomme Septimus.
Okay.
Goodman 7 o'clock.
Is that because kids are asleep by 7?
Don't know what that means. Who, in some versions of their stories, throws sand in children's eyes to blind them so that he might capture the children.
Oh.
So there's that too.
Child predator. Interesting.
But contrarily to the Sandman that we know, his bag is the place where he traps children who don't go to bed.
I'm all about this. I love this so much.
Oh, I'm so stressed about the pronunciation of this Danish thing.
I once wrote a little 4-panel comic strip that I did with our friend Bex Comics on Instagram. And she illustrated it. And it was all about a traveling peddler who strikes a bargain with a child, a poor child, to steal his eyes. And I had no idea about the Sandman history.
Really?
When I wrote that.
I assumed that was why he wrote it.
I should claim it as yes, but I didn't. And yeah, he has a bag full of eyes.
Bag full of eyes, just like the Sandman.
Yep.
The character got somewhat less threatening in 1841 when Hans Christian Andersen wrote Ol Luko. I'm saying it wrong. It's Danish. It's hard to say.
I've read that. I have no idea how it's pronounced.
Apologies for my American ignorance.
It's like a foreign language.
Ol is a Danish first name, and Lukjo means close eye. Anderson wrote, There's nobody in the world who knows so many stories as this character, or who can relate them so nicely. In the evening, when the children are seated at the table or in their little chairs, he comes up the stairs very softly, for he walks in his socks, and then he opens the doors without the slightest noise and throws a small quantity of very fine dust in their eyes, just enough to prevent them from keeping them open, and so they do not see him. Then he creeps behind them and blows softly upon their necks until their heads begin to droop. But he does not wish to hurt them, for he is very fond of children, and only wants them to be quiet so that he may relate to them pretty stories. And they never are quiet until they are in bed and asleep.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as they are asleep, he seats himself upon the bed. He's nicely dressed, and his coat is made of silken fabric, but it's impossible to say of what color, for it changes from green to red and red to blue as he turns from side to side.
Wow.
And under each arm, he carries an umbrella. One of them with pictures on the inside, which he spreads over the good children, and then they dream of the most beautiful stories the whole night. But the other umbrella has no pictures, and this he holds over the naughty children, so that they sleep heavily and wake in the morning without having had dreams at all. Woof.
Woof.
It feels so metal. I don't know why.
Black umbrella.
The bad kids get the black umbrella. In Norway and Sweden, he's called John Blund, which blunda is a verb that means both to shut one's eyes and to keep one's eyes shut. And in blund is a noun that means both an occurrence of eyes shut and an occurrence of sleep. This makes me think of kind of like Jack Frost.
Yeah.
You know, like
Sure.
that kind of vibe.
Mm-hmm.
And in the Netherlands, Belgium, and parts of southern Africa, he's referred to as Klaas Vaak.
All right.
He's like a dream guy. He brings dreams,
Mhm.
or not. But either way, he's going to get your ass to sleep.
You're going to sleep. I do appreciate how, like, Hans Christian Andersen writing the first version of it as a fairy tale. He's not actually called the Sandman.
Mm-mm.
But there are versions, there are like...
But he does sprinkle dust in children's eyes.
But he does the same
So,
thing.
yeah.
Right. He took the idea, but like reframed it and gave it a different name.
But these are all considered to be, or those two are considered to be like the published accounts, the first published accounts
Right.
that we have of the Sandman story.
Right.
Sleepopolis.com said of the Sandman, depending on the portrayal, the Sandman can be good or evil or somewhere in between.
Yeah.
Hoffman's Sandman is undoubtedly wicked, while Anderson's is decidedly good. Of course, other good, evil, and even more gray versions have appeared as the characters continue to make appearances throughout pop culture.
This is reminding me of something very specific we've talked about, how like depending on the story, it's either good or evil. I can't remember.
Pinocchio?
Not quite. I don't know what.
But it's uncanny to me that Robert Louis Stevenson, who wrote the Land of Nod poem, also really shared this theme
right.
in his literature.
No, that is fascinating. You say Jack Frost, I say Jack O'Lantern. This is reminding me very much of Stingy Jack, how that was a folk tale told over and over to explain lights over swamps in the woods, swamp gas.
Will-o'-the-wisps.
That became what we know today as the Jack-o'-lantern, thanks to Catholicism blending with, British folklore.
It all just is a big melting pot, as they say.
The world is a melting pot. We are melting, aren't we?
We are melting. That is true.
Climate change.
The Sandman makes appearances in everything from the Powerpuff Girls to Rise of the Guardians to being muse material for your favorite Christian, Neil Gaiman.
Oh, dude. Yeah.
Songs based on the figure of the Sandman include the 1950s classic Mr. Sandman by the Chordettes.
Mr. Sandman.
Also, Roy Orbison's In Dreams, in which the singer is put to sleep by a candy-colored clown they call the Sandman to dreams of his lost love. And also Metallica's Enter Sandman, whose lyrics juxtapose child bedtime rituals and nightmarish imagery. I didn't know this, trigger warning, but Metallica's Enter Sandman originally included a reference to crib death.
Oh.
The more you know.
Okay.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, all right.
Pretty dark.
Pretty dark.
But that's a fairy tale.
Exactly! Now we're getting somewhere!
Back in the Land of Nod, our Sandman begins testing some of his products and discovers, after dozing and being awoken by Jill, that the glittery sand that he sampled needs more snooze, which I thought was funny.
Needs more snooze.
Needs more snooze!
I don't believe you. I don't believe any of this.
Jill is unamused, claiming that she doesn't believe any of it, and it must be some kind of a joke, until he tells her it's exactly what she wished for.
You're in your own fairy tale! Would you like to see how it comes out?
Yes.
Ah, sorry, that would be cheating.
She wants to go home, but checking the book, he tells her that that's not what happens, and fairy tales can't be changed. While the finality of the big book slamming triggered some revelation trauma for me, you and I both know that fairy tales and life change all the dang time.
Yeah, it feels very familiar. It feels
All
very
the time.
heavy. I mean, literally, because it's a big book. But
Where's my family? Did you take them too?
Don't worry, they're here. They won't bother you anymore. Just like you wished.
No, I'm going home.
You can't. That's reality. You wanted a fairy tale, remember?
No, I don't. I want to go home.
We all want to be somewhere else until we're faced with the possibility that we can't get home.
Right.
Right, Dorothy?
Right, Coraline?
There's no place like it. Home can mean many things, literal and figurative, but not being able to go there again is haunting, however mixed your feelings might be. He says the quiet thing out loud now, though.
Then maybe you should have been a little bit more careful about what you wished for.
And how many times have we talked about this in the show?
Over.
Twisted Claw.
Monkey's paw. I said it earlier.
it.
Over and over and over, we hear these things.
Careful what you wish for, guys.
The Sandman begins to laugh, adopting more maniacal qualities, in contrast to the way he sometimes seems downright friendly, which plays with this Jekyll and Hyde nature that we're learning is a Sandman hallmark.
Hey, yes.
Jill runs back to the bed where she first landed and sees another door in the distance. In this nightmarish hall, she's spinning around with dozens of doors to choose from.
Like to try another fairy tale? They're all so much fun.
Behind one door, a Queen of Hearts comes to life, axe in hand, shouting,
"Off with her head!"
Which is not a fairy tale, but is Alice in Wonderland.
It's Alice in Wonderland. Behind another door, the witch from Hansel and Gretel wants to bake her in a wood-burning stove.
I was expecting Hansel and Gretel, but you too nice. Come closer, my dear.
And one more door reveals her friends Stacy and Rick, along with her family, deep in sleep.
I didn't want this. This isn't what I wished for.
Yes, you did. Welcome to your fairy tale.
I think that Samantha, the actress, does a really good job here, and her terror makes it feel much more intense.
Yeah, she did good.
She runs back through the veils, the halls of clocks, and the sleeping townsfolk still shouting about wanting to go home. And then she threatens to break the big giant hourglass, which finally gets the Sandman's attention.
Yeah.
Put it down, Jill. You don't know what you're doing.
You send me home and send my family and friends home too.
I can't. Fairy tales can't be changed. They are what they are. Now leave it alone.
And again, I ask, is that not the point of fairy tales?
Right.
Of stories of imagination, that they can change and do all the time, even when reality can't?
Exactly.
This, in my opinion, wasn't a very strong argument from the Sandman, especially since he's supposed to be arguing with a fairy tale expert in Jill. But I digress.
Yeah.
This is indeed where his plans all fall apart anyway.
Go.
But you wanted everyone to live happily ever after. They'll sleep peacefully forever in the land of Nod.
They're prisoners, and so am I.
Being awake and alive is the far better alternative we are all supposed to realize here.
I'm awake, I'm alive.
I'm awake, I'm alive.
Cue Skillet.
With Jill's realization, the Sandman threatens to put her to sleep too, which leads to an incredibly labyrinth-coded revelation.
Right.
What?
So the fairy tale can be changed after all.
I didn't say that.
Yes, you did. It's my fairy tale, and if you can change it, so can I.
She smashes the hourglass and wakes, screaming in bed.
Just like you.
And we've made it back to reality, or so it seems. It was all a dream. You were there, and you. I feel like we've quoted that probably a dozen times.
A dozen
going
times
on
at this
3 years
point,
in. Also, her mom seems genuinely concerned this time when she wakes up.
Yeah.
Which feels very different compared to how we've seen her mom up until this point.
Right.
They're all asking if she's all right.
You were screaming. Are you okay?
No, she's not. She's a nutcase.
This sends her into a fit of pretty unconvincing giggles, and she apologizes again for her honestly very normal, developmentally appropriate, and not really all that disruptive to anybody else behavior.
Yeah, honestly.
And tells them that she thinks it's time to give up the fairy tale stuff. For a second here, we begin to think that the moral of the story is that you need to stop reading fairy tales when you're 13, because apparently that's when the clock runs out. And we think that you're supposed to do this because sometimes fairy tales are scary and this can impede into your life if you're too afraid of them when you're 13, which feels like a problem that you'd have before you were 13. I don't know. But we do know that life can be scarier than fairy tales, and fairy tales can also be scarier than life.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bunch of duality here, and it can be really hard to draw the lines because they're trying to make a lot of different points. So I appreciate the ambition, at least.
It's complex, for sure.
Now that they've beaten Jill down like they've been trying to do all along, her mom immediately recants this grow-up diatribe that she's been married to, either because she's somehow reconnected with her own inner child in the last 10 minutes, or because we just needed to put a bow on this 20-minute TV episode.
Right.
She says,
That's fine, honey. Just don't give up on the kid inside altogether, okay?
now you tell her.
Yeah, where'd this come from?
Now you
This whole time you've been giving me
have done
shit.
a complete 180. Like, she did some inner child work. She did something. Something happened because she's now in a totally different space with all of it. And still, I think that's more like it. And I like that messaging a lot better, personally.
She got her workout in the day before.
Jill hangs her Raggedy Ann off the bed one more time with a chuckle to herself and settles in for sleep. But as the wind blows into the open window and turns the pages of her book, we see a nice illustration and another end to the book titled The Tale of the Final Wish.
The little girl went back to sleep, promising never to believe in fairy tales again. If only she knew, she would have never gone back in that bed again.
This confused me until I sat with it for a second.
It is phrased very strangely.
It's so weird. It's basically saying, if only she knew better than to get into bed again, to go to sleep and dream, she would never have done that.
Yes.
But they tried to be way too concise with it. Way too clean and neat.
The phrasing confused me too. But yeah,
also,
the
they
idea
used the word,
here,
they ended 2 sentences back to back with again.
Again.
I hated that part.
Which bothers you and I. But
you and me.
We are left here again with another false ending like we just talked about with Hey Arnold and Weez and Ed.
Yeah. This cave hanger.
Do we think that when she goes to sleep, she's really awake? And maybe when she just woke up, she was still dreaming? And if she was still dreaming, that would explain her mom's personality shift.
I mean, I guess the interpretations are endless. Yeah, at that point.
We may never know.
I can't believe that DJ would let a story end with, it was all a dream. There has to be more.
But I think there is, yeah.
So,
I don't think that that's the ending, I think.
Yeah.
I think that there's more to tell, more tale to tell there.
It's a dun-dun-dun cliffhanger, cave hanger kind of situation.
Though we didn't return to the campfire during the story, which felt kind of strange now that I realized it as I got to the end, we wrap up with them now.
So, don't take fairy tales lightly. You never know which ones are made up and which ones are real.
Excellent. And see, I can with this closing line.
Yeah?
They kind of messed up the one inside the book, but I like this one.
This one works.
Kristen's won over even Frank, who kneels and takes her hand to ask just one question.
What?
Where's the part about the kids getting their heads chopped off?
They all laughed, as did I, because we all know this was DJ poking fun at the whole nature of the show.
Right.
It was never going to be blood and guts.
Never.
We can talk about it, but we can't depict it.
Exactly, you're right.
And it's pretty funny to see that.
That is interesting.
See him say it kind of tongue-in-cheek as well.
It does feel like he was, using this episode to just sort of bring to the forefront everything he dealt with up to now.
Yeah.
With the whole show.
And his whole idea about scary tales and being able to explore fairy tales at all. I think this was probably a very special episode for him.
It seems that way.
But just conjecture.
I was disappointed with how the stakes were presented fairly, but it did seem to wrap up pretty quickly. I think because the exposition took time and he needed to kind of build the narrative up to a point. And then there was a lot of running around and just being afraid for a while, which is, classic horror film style.
You gotta have that.
I guess I just wish there was more to the whole twist ending than the...
They just really left it in an ambiguous place. Yeah. They just didn't want to commit to too much more story.
I mean,
Just kind of like we talked about with Hey Arnold, just kind of let you believe what you believe,
Yeah, I get it.
As we zoom out of the scene, I was also struck by how much older they all look from season 1. It kind of hit me.
For
I was
real.
like, whoa.
I know.
Sand through the hourglass.
Hey.
We mentioned this earlier, but while it felt sort of heavy-handed and overdone upon first watch, the way everyone around Jill feels so antagonistic, almost to the point of, I don't know, dreamlike absurdity, made me realize that there was a lot of magic in that perspective. Because that's how it feels at 13,
Yeah.
Nobody likes you when you're 13 or 23. Everybody's out to get you all the time. And I think that they really leaned into that to show it happen that way.
Nobody likes when you're 33 either.
Yeah, that either.
Get ready.
We've missed it. You've missed it. It's time for the Scareometer.
Scareometer.
What did you give this episode?
I appreciate so much of the sentiment behind this concept and the story. And like we've said, it's referenced so many things we've already talked about, and it is on brand. It's so on brand. It's quintessential That's Pretty Dark. Mm-hmm. And yet, I don't know that it's that scary for me as a whole, as an episode.
I mean, you're entitled to your Scareometer opinion.
I think I have to give it like a 3 or a 4. Although we've talked many times about how, you know, the fear of like our actions causing harm to others, or like as a direct result of something that we do or say, with the whole be careful what you wish for.
Core fears.
But if we're comparing like 1-to-1, this compared to Twisted Claw, Twisted Claw is so much scarier to me.
It probably is.
It's the same exact moral, same exact takeaway.
Just be careful what you wish for.
Be careful what you wish for.
It's that, so and it's also the whole like, at what point do you give up your fairy tales? At what point do you ground yourself?
That's scarier to me than
and that's
anything else
scarier
in this
to me
episode.
too, which is why I gave it a 5.5 or a 6.
That makes that's teetering on 4 or 5 versus the episode, which is 3 or 4. But yeah, the whole like.
Also, you got to give it credit for that one moment with John standing by the bed.
That's just a jump scare.
That jump scared me.
Look, jump scares are cheap. They're cheap. I don't know. I'm more about the psychological
the visual
horror.
Of seeing him next to the bed, I will think about it later, you know?
I think I just wanted more from this episode.
They crammed a lot into a short amount of time, so.
There was almost, I was about to say, this one, along with the Captured Souls, to me, these could be feature films.
Oh yeah, I think so too.
Neil Gaiman took this concept and made Coraline. Similarly enough, you know, parents disappear, you have to go into the world, defeat the thing that's created this world that's capturing your parents, you know, to then bring your parents back, and they are, you know, none the wiser that you're the hero of this whole story. But yeah, 3, 4, or 5.
Well, that's very decisive of you.
I feel good about it.
Yeah, I went with like 5.5 to 6 just because of all those elements, and
sure,
growing up is scary in its own right. So
yes, growing up is scary.
I saw a lot of that in this.
And you know what? Hey, waking up is hard to do. So.
Waking up is also hard to do. Overall, I do love this episode. It was just one more source screaming at myself and countless other 90s kids about the importance of planting your feet in reality. A reality that was much easier for us to access sans technology, by the way.
Right.
And also the importance of balancing reality with your also very human need to escape said reality every now and then.
Yep.
I think you and I, but also Jill and our Darkling friends, are probably among the few whose escapes include large doses of fiction and truth all at once. But I would argue that this duality helps us to cope even better with life's mundanity than other escapees.
Wow.
So, cheers to that. Cheers to keeping our magic alive. Cheers to fondness for the gray areas. And cheers, most of all, to sleeping with one eye open so it doesn't get plucked out and fed to the Sandman's children in his iron nest on the dark side of the moon.
God damn.
Although I guess if your eyes are open, that means they're vulnerable. So
yeah, I guess close your eyes. Oh man, put yourself in an iron mask or something. Get away from the Sandman.
I would do just about anything to keep my eyes.
But if like,
I'm gonna be real about that.
You know, all these old stories people told children to keep them safe or just to get them to like behave,
to
like
comply is the word you're looking for.
If you were told, go to sleep or the Sandman will come and take your eyes. How the hell are you supposed to
How are you supposed to sleep when you're imagining the Sandman in his iron nest? I don't know.
The Sandman is coming.
It would know, like, it all depends on whether your parents told you the Hoffman version or
That's
the Hans
also
Christian
true.
Andersen
the Hoffman version technically was not for children.
It was just the first published account.
It was just published, right.
Hans Christian Andersen was for children, so...
Yes.
Sometimes that makes all the difference. And then sometimes the stuff that is for children is also equally pretty dark, so...
So which kind of parent are you?
Ask yourself that question.
Do you tell your children the
wimpy version of the fairy tale, or do you tell your children?
Or do you threaten them with losing their eyeballs?
Yeah, let us know. Tell us. Write to us.
And speaking of telling us things, if you're interested in joining us on our Patreon, where we try to put out content, but you are mostly graciously and amazingly supporting us, doing all of this beautiful podcast work for you.
Yeah.
You can join us at patreon.com/TPD podcast.
That's right.
We actually do have a patron to thank.
That geek Evan.
Thank you, Evan.
Evan T.
Thank you. We're not calling you a geek, by the way. That's
No,
his
you're
username.
calling yourself a geek. And I call myself a geek. I'm a nerd, geek, dork,
all those things.
Idiot, moron.
You can also join us on our social media. That's Pretty Dark Podcast. That's Pretty Dark on TikTok.
Yeah, or send us an email at that'sprettydarkpodcast@gmail.com. No apostrophe.
Please do.
Please.
We would love to hear from you. We would love to hear how you are kicking off your own Pretty Dark summer.
Spooky summer.
Tell us things. We are easing ourselves on our way towards spooky season again, which doesn't even feel real because last spooky season didn't feel real in the slightest. So I'm excited to hopefully have, knock on wood,
any day now,
a more normal spooky season with you all.
Day. There's going to be the Spirit Halloween banner going up.
There's already some stuff in Joann's in Texas. I saw it online, and
yeah,
I'm very excited.
Pumped about that.
Good times are coming, guys.
Get that serotonin, get that dopamine.
I need it. I need it desperately.
It's going to be a good time. Guys, we have so much amazing content planned for this summer.
We do.
Some things that really mean a lot to us, some that we think are going to mean a lot to you.
We hope.
That you maybe have buried away. Maybe you've dug. A little bit.
Some holes to bury it
maybe
in.
You've holed up. You've buried it into a hole. Maybe a few holes.
There may be some holes involved, yes.
Maybe. More or less.
Okay, guys. You guys be good. Be better than us.
Please, always.
And we will be so excited to get into your ears just as soon as you let us do so again.
Your ear holes. Thanks for listening, guys.
Bye.
If nothing else, remember, you're never really alone.
Never.
Never.
Thanks for listening to That's Pretty Dark, written and produced by Christian Baxter Mott and Kaylin Andrews.
Our music is composed by Jonathan Simmons, and our art is provided by Paige Garland at Power Girl Illustration.
Join the collective nostalgia and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at That's Pretty Dark Podcast.
Share your experiences and let us know what shows, films, or villains still haunt you from childhood at that'sprettydarkpodcast@gmail.com. Remember, you're never really alone.
So, until next time, sweet dreams, everyone.
What's so wrong about wanting to live in a place where dreams come true, where you can wish upon a star? I wish I could, and I wish everybody would leave me alone.